Well, Merle, thanks so much for agreeing to come and speak to us today. Can we begin with you introducing yourself and telling about your family heritage and your background?
My traditional name is Giljade, and it was given to me by my Nani Florence Davidson when I was a young girl, and I'm from Haida Gwaii originally, born and raised in Haida Gwaii.
Oh, but now you're living in the Tsawwassen area. Right?
I've been in Tsawwassen for 32 years.
Okay, wow. And so, Merle, how did you decide to choose teaching as your career?
I honestly thought that it would be an easy job. That I could, spend time with my son more and stuff like that, because I was a single mom with my eldest son. Mm-hmm. And little did I know how involved teaching really is. So and then I thought it would be really good to be a role model to the other Haida children that I would be in contact with.
Mm-hmm. So what was your experience like as a child going to school in Haida Gwaii?
It was kind of mixed. I went to an Indian day school, that's what it was called, and it was right close to where I lived, and it was handy. But they selected a few people to go to the regular school in the town, and so I went there, and it was kind of nerve-wracking because there was only a few Haida children that went to that school, and we were bused every day, and I had to take lunch box and horrible lunches, just because they get stale so quick. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would have rather been closer to home.
Uh-huh. Yes. So obviously you had to leave Haida Gwaii to go to university. Did you go to UBC or where did you go?
I went to the Native Indian Education Teacher Program, which is a program that was designed to get more Aboriginal teachers into the school system. And I went to a campus, off campus, but it was run by UBC. The profs came to us. Mm-hmm. It was a very intense course, so we had profs come out for a week at a time to teach different subjects. Mm-hmm. And we had to go to the local college for our English programs, and then we did our final 2 years at UBC. Mm-hmm. But we had a lot more practical teaching, like practicums for practice teaching and stuff like that throughout the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. So you knew right away if you loved it or not.
Yes. And you loved it right away, did you?
I loved it. It was very challenging because it was all so new to us to get out there with really no background, not much, because you had to kind of learn as you were going and just be ready to just pick up and teach right away. They start you out with a couple classes, and then pretty soon you're doing full weeks at the end of the year. Oh. Yeah.
I imagine that would have been a neat experience, though, in terms of meeting other young Aboriginal people from different parts of the province coming together in that program.
Yeah, it was lifelong friendships, Oh, so, to watch what they're doing in their careers is really amazing, because some of them became principals, superintendents, and lawyers and stuff like that after. Yeah.
So where was your first teaching job?
My first teaching job was in Prince Rupert at Canada Elementary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking, but there was 200 new teachers hired that year.
Wow.
There was a big turnover, and it was the last time that they had such a big turnover.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And so you taught there for how long?
I taught there for 3 years, well, 2.5, I think, because there was a teacher strike. Uh-huh. And I couldn't sustain my living because of the teacher strike. I lost a lot of pay, and so I moved home to my parents in Masset. So I didn't finish my 3rd year.
Yeah. And so then from there, did you continue teaching somewhere else, or?
I worked for my home nation for a few years as the education or the homeschool coordinator.
Oh, yes.
And from there I met my husband, who was from Tsawwassen, and I moved to Tsawwassen 32 years ago. Yeah. And I got hired to Delta School District to work in Aboriginal education, to work with students like a learning assistance teacher to begin with. And I worked there for quite a few years.
And so how was it that you became involved with the BC Teachers Federation and the Aboriginal Education Task Force?
I first read about it in the teacher magazine and saw the advertisement, and I believed in the BCTF because I really utilized them early in my career and was supported by them. So I thought I wouldn't mind doing something to help not only the BCTF but the Aboriginal teachers and students as well, and the communities, because with the work that needed to be done, I figured I really would like to get involved to figure out how we could make things better for our students in the schools.
What were the biggest obstacles and challenges facing Aboriginal teachers and students? This is at 1999 that task force was struck, right?
Yeah, well, the graduation rate was very poor, and the students weren't getting the kinds of things that they needed, and teachers, I guess, were getting kind of fed up as well, trying to teach, but having kids being pulled out of class and stuff like that. That's how it all started. They wanted to stop the kids from being pulled out of class. But that was one way that we could have connection with our children, was to have the pull-out program so that they could get more of a jump on education and get some things fulfilled like that they're not getting in the regular classroom, like the teaching of Aboriginal curriculum, Aboriginal art and music and stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing I was doing. So I thought, well, I'd like to see more of that in the schools. So I thought that would be an avenue to address through the task force, was to bring up those kinds of concerns.
So can you describe the process that the task force went through when you were doing your work, and then later bringing it to the annual meeting for adoption by the Federation?
It was quite a grueling task to do this work, because there was a lot of travel involved, and we got to go to different parts of the province to speak with teachers and community members about the kinds of things that we needed to learn about, what the missing links were, you know, and to try to strategize to improve education so the graduation rate would also improve. So it was it was a daunting task, because we met with a lot of different things that we really weren't prepared for, like the racism we faced, you know, and just the hardships of the communities and their needs as well, you know. And so it was a very eye-opening.
Yes.
It was a very eye-opening experience, and it took a lot of emotional work on our parts as members of the task force, because, you know, we were faced with the reality of what the whole of BC was going through, and in fact Canada, but, you know, we're focused on BC, of course. So it was a daunting task to try to pick and choose the things that we needed to bring forward to improve on the education system in BC. So it was pretty exciting, and yet also very emotional.
Yes, I can imagine. Both to confront the racism that you were feeling from other teachers, but also to confront the severe issues of poverty and intergenerational trauma and all that was in communities, I imagine.
Yeah, and I guess the part of it is just not really understanding the full effect of our history.
Yeah.
You know, that was a big part of it, and I think that was the beginning of our understanding, our full understanding, being immersed in it, because, you know, we're looking at we're looking at an institution that is so old in comparison to how involved we are as a people. Like, it hasn't been that long that we've been involved with public education.
Right, right. Is there one particular community or one particular moment that stands out in your memory of all those travels that you did around the province? Any child or teacher whose experience struck you?
It was just good to see the places where there was work being done. On the positive side of it, there of course was the positive side of it, where there were the ones that were the warriors in education, you know, ensuring that local history and stuff was implemented into programs, and so it was good. That part of it was good, you know. But it basically, I guess, the thing that that kept us going was seeing that there's positive changes.
Is possible, yeah.
Yeah.
Is necessary. Yeah.
Positive changes were starting to occur already, and you know, that we could build on those positive experiences.
Yes, yes. So your task force came together. You wrote a lengthy report that was forwarded to the BCTF and then brought forward at that 1999 annual general meeting in Vancouver. What do you remember about how that report was received and those motions were responded to?
Well, of course, there's always the naysayers, but in the end, it was very positive in the end. You know, the votes were positive, and we did have we had established out of that whole thing to hire a temporary employee for the BCTF in Aboriginal Education, the Director of Aboriginal Education, and that was really exciting. It was for 6 months, and it wasn't written in stone yet till the following year.
Oh, okay.
So of course the rest of the task force encouraged me to apply, and I said, oh, I don't think I could do it. It's a pretty big job. And they said, you're the only one because you live here already. And I'm going, oh my goodness, I don't think I'm really ready for this. But with their encouragement, I went ahead and applied, and I got hired, and it was for 6 months. And then it was very scary for me because it meant my family was still pretty young. So I ended up doing the job, and there was a panel of about 8 or 9 people who interviewed me. So it was very, very nerve-wracking, and I didn't really know what what it was going to be like in the end. I was so scared, and at the end of it, I got up and I shook each one of their hands and I said, thank you for your time. And I left there and I was just so nervous. I was like, oh my God, I was shaking. And I did get the job for the 6 months, and then I had to reapply and go through the same grueling experience.
For the 4-year
For the
term.
4-year term, yeah. So it was pretty exciting.
Yeah. So you were the pioneer in this work within the staff of the BCTF. And since then, there's been, I think, 4, maybe more teachers who have followed in your footsteps and built upon that work. And
it's been, I kind of like to say warrior in the work.
Yes.
But anyways, it has been very good. It's hard to believe that so many have followed.
Yes.
You know, since it started, and I never really thought too deeply about it, but Chris Stewart was always saying, Merle, this is so amazing. Oh my God, this is groundbreaking. And I never really, I guess if I thought like that, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did, because I tried not to be afraid to do the work that needed to be done, because if I thought about what I was doing, I probably would have got scared and would have not been myself to be able to do it, you know.
Yeah. Well, yes, as you say, it was an enormous mandate, a daunting task, as you said, and it continues to be, I think. But when you look back on where you were at that point and where we are today, after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and the 94 calls to action, what does it make you reflect on, and how do you feel?
I feel really proud that we've been able to sustain the work, and to actually like shake and move the Federation and the institution of education in the province, because it has been very staunch and allowing us in as Aboriginal educators and as Aboriginal learners. And I feel that the Aboriginal education movement is a real positive movement, and it's snowballing into something that's going to, really help us to make change in the curriculum, so that all members of the province that are part of the education system will learn about our First Nations communities and our rich history and culture that never did die, and just to make it a part of the old history, just because we were an oral history and not a written history, it'll grow even more from what they're doing, with implementing different Aboriginal curriculum into the different grades and stuff like that, and as well as into the teaching profession.
Yes. Yeah, so you were mentioning earlier that, the courses now that are required for student teachers, and these curricular changes now that are meant to interweave Aboriginal content across all curricula. It's quite a different structure and quite a different approach now that is just kind of being launched, it seems.
Yeah, I think it's more inclusive, and I think it's about time. We've waited a long time, and it's slow in my eyes because I've lived it all my life.
Yes.
But, for the little ones, it means learning about themselves at a younger age, which is most important, to be part of, because they spend so many hours of the day away from their folks. It's important to learn about where you're from and who you are, and to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week I went on a field trip with some grade 4 and 5 students up to Spuzum, and they're learning about the Spuzum Nation and about Gladys Chapman, who was a girl who died at residential school who came from there. So they're going through a whole series of lessons about the family, the band, the history of the residential schools and their impact on that community. So we went to the cemetery where Gladys is buried. And on the bus, I was talking to a couple of little guys, and I was asking them, how they felt when they learned about residential schools. And this one little boy said, "I was shocked. If I was alive in those days, I would know it was wrong." And then later I asked him about the apology from the Prime Minister. What did he think of that? He said, "Well, it's always good to say your story, but it's not enough." And it was so amazing because the children were so clear, right? Their sense of justice is so strong. And it just really made me feel like it's this generation now.
Yeah, it's pretty profound that, that they're talking about it, even because, as you recall earlier, I was mentioning this personal story about my son not really understanding about the history and how it affects him as well as myself.
Yeah. So it's healthy, isn't it, all these conversations?
It's beautiful because we finally get to tell our story. And, I finally feel like that we need to be allowed to tell our story in order to move forward. And that means from both sides. Because if we don't get together and tell the whole story, then there's no point in beginning, And truth and reconciliation is not just about our story, but also the impact of our visitors, and I think once we realize that and we start doing more work in that area, the generational trauma that we've all suffered will help us to heal what we need to as a people. And I think that's most important.
I'm glad too that the Federation is very much taking the stand that reconciliation is a job for us all, right? It's not just it's not an Aboriginal problem, it's a Canadian problem.
Yes.
And that everyone has a role or a duty.
I like that because, you know, we can fight our fight, but if we don't have assistance from the causes, then we won't get ahead. Like, you know, and I find that with these changes, I think we have hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention, Merle, that I haven't thought to ask you about, or?
I can't think of anything at the moment. It just, you know, it's such a deep and personal story that everyone has a different one.
Yes.
Not all our stories are the same. It would be so much easier if they were, but of course, you know, like there's some students who never saw home, and there was some who came home for Christmas and, you know, different holidays and stuff. So everybody's story is so different, you know. Some people were at residential school for 16 years straight.
Wow.
And, you know, family members that were left there, lost there, were never talked about. And so there's so many untold stories, and none are the same. Not all of them are the same. They could be similar, and, you know. And I guess that's the other thing about the task force, is everybody was at different places, you know, and I think our own personal stories have a lot to do, like my story with my own father, going to residential school and almost dying there himself, and then coming home to be nourished by his mother to live, because he was like not unable to eat any more of the food, you know, and yet he still stood up and said, no, the education is so important. And I always fought him on that, and in the end, you know, going to university and stuff like that, I was the first one from our community to finish a degree, so he was so excited. But, you know, I think it's important that everyone knows that everyone's story is different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your story today. Really appreciate it. It's been a real honor.
Thanks.